Today, we unravel a chilling case that rocked Singapore to its core. On the quiet evening of January 6, 1979, a family in the Toa Payoh housing estate plummeted into an unimaginable tragedy. When the father returned home after a long day's work, he was met with a gut-wrenching sight: his 4 young children, 3 boys and 1 girl, aged 5 to 10, sprawled lifeless in the bathroom. Their bodies stacked atop one another, each pierced by dozens of stab wounds. No note, no clear clues. The apartment showed no signs of being ransacked. But strangest of all, one child still clutched a fistful of hair, as if their final desperate act was to point to the killer. This case sent shockwaves through the Lion City, only to fade into obscurity over 4 long decades. The murderer has never been brought to justice. And the question lingers: who could commit such a savage act against innocent children? Why? You're watching True Crime in the World, where we dive into the most baffling mysteries and gripping stories. As always, before we dig into today's case, hit that like button, subscribe, and join us on this journey. Thank you. After breaking away from the Federation of Malaysia in 1965, Singapore, under the iron-fisted leadership of Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, surged into an era of rapid economic growth. The nation boasted cutting-edge infrastructure, advanced transportation and telecommunications, high per capita income, and a pristine civilized urban landscape. This drew waves of tourists and immigrants from across the globe. To tackle the housing crisis sparked by a booming population, the Singapore government rolled out its public housing policy known as HDB flats. Built by the Housing and Development Board, these flats were sold to citizens at subsidized rates. Affordable, strategically located, and pivotal in easing the housing crunch, HDB flats now house over 80% of Singapore's population. The family at the heart of today's story lived in one such HDB flat. On the 5th floor of Block 58, Geylang Bahru, lived the Tan family of 6. The father, Tan Kan Tai, 36, was a driver. The mother, Lee Mei Ying, 32, worked as a ticket inspector. Every morning, the couple ferried neighborhood kids to school in their vehicle. That Saturday morning, January 6, 1979, started like any other, no hint of the horror to come. Though it was the weekend, primary school students still had classes. At around 6:35 a.m. after breakfast, Tan Kan Tai and Lee Mei Ying kissed their 4 sleeping children goodbye and set off to drive the other kids to school, as they always did. By law, leaving young children home alone was prohibited. But back then, for many working families, balancing income and childcare was a brutal challenge. Reluctantly, some parents, including the Tans, left their kids at home, locking the door or asking relatives or neighbors to check in. The Tan family had 4 children, and the eldest son, Tan Kok Ping, and 10, a primary 5 student. The second son, Tan Kok Hung, 8, in primary 2. The third son, Tan Kok Thuan, 6, in primary 1. And the youngest, their daughter, Tan Tran Ni, 5. The 3 boys attended Min Tree School near their home. Little Tran Ni was set to start kindergarten the following Monday. Her bag and supplies were already prepared. But tragedy struck just 2 days before her first day of school. At around 7:10 a.m., 35 minutes after leaving home, Tan Kan Tai pulled the car over. As usual, Lee Mei Ying called home to wake the kids for school. The phone rang and rang. No one answered. A flicker of unease hit her, but she brushed it off. Maybe the kids were still fast asleep. She'd try again later. Throughout the morning, the couple called home repeatedly at different times, but the result was the same silence. Growing anxious, Lee Mei Ying reached out to a neighbor, Miss Tan, who lived nearby, asking her to check on the children. Between 8:30 and 9:00 a.m., Ms. Tan arrived at the Tan's door and knocked loudly. Nothing. The apartment was eerily silent. She peered through the window, but the curtains were drawn tight, blocking any view inside. In 1979, mobile phones didn't exist, so Ms. Tan couldn't contact Lee Mei-ying on the spot. She returned home planning to head to the market and inform the couple later. Meanwhile, on the school shuttle bus, Lee Mei-ying had no inkling of the horror unfolding. She trusted her neighbor had woken the kids as requested. So after finishing the morning school run, she and her husband didn't rush home to check. Instead, they stuck to their routine ferrying factory workers from nearby plants after their morning shifts. At 9:59 a.m., the Tans finally returned home. Lee Mei-ying unlocked the door, but as she stepped inside, dread crept in. The children's school bags sat untouched on the small living room table. Their shoes hadn't budged. A chilling unease gripped her. As she passed the kitchen heading toward the bathroom at the back, the sight before her shattered her world. Her 4 children drenched in blood, riddled with stab wounds, piled atop one another on the floor. The gruesome scene sent her collapsing, her screams tearing through the apartment. Hearing her cries, neighbors rushed over and immediately called the police. The first officer arrived at 10:04 a.m. Confronted by the ghastly scene, he urgently radioed for backup. Soon, the Criminal Investigation Department (CID) dispatched its Special Crimes Unit, along with a swarm of officers and investigators to the scene. Among them was seasoned investigator Simon Supia, with 14 years of case-cracking experience. When he reached Block 58, Geylang Bahru, a crowd of curious onlookers had already gathered, nearly blocking the entrance. Once a security cordon was set up, Supia ascended to the 5th floor. To understand the case, let's examine the layout of the Tan family's apartment. The front door opened into a spacious living and dining area, the heart of the home. Beyond the kitchen lay the bathroom and a small bedroom at the rear. With only one bedroom, Tan Kan Tai and Lee Mei-ying slept on a bed while their 4 children spread mats on the floor in the same room. At the scene, Supia's first observation was striking. The apartment had 2 doors, a wooden inner door and an outer iron security gate. Neither showed signs of forced entry. Inside, the living and dining areas were pristine with no evidence of rummaging or struggle. The children's school bags remained untouched on the table. A small fish tank with 2 fish swimming calmly sat nearby, an eerie contrast to the carnage. But when Supia reached the bathroom and saw the 4 children, he was floored. Their frail bodies were stacked atop one another. The eldest Tan Kok Ping lay at the bottom. The youngest Tan Tran Ni was on top. Each child's face was unrecognizable, marred by countless wounds, blood pooling everywhere. Later, Supia would call this the most horrific case of his career. Nothing else came close. By 11:40 a.m., 2 renowned forensic experts, Dr. Chao Tzi Cheng and Dr. Wang Kim Po, arrived. Examining the children's wounds, they determined the killer used 2 distinct knives. One was likely a cleaver or large butchering knife. The eldest Tan Kok Ping bore 25 to 26 stab wounds across his head, face, and torso. His right hand was nearly severed, hanging by a thin strip of flesh. His left hand clutched a fistful of hair, evidence of a desperate struggle with the killer. The second son, Tan Kok Hung 8, had fatal wounds to the back of his head, neck, and abdomen. His skull was cracked, nearly split in 2 by a single brutal blow. The third son, Tan Kok Thuan 6, endured over 20 wounds across his body. The youngest Tan Tran Ni, just 5, wasn't spared. She bore over 20 deep stabs, many to her face. Heartbreakingly, her tiny hand still gripped her favorite pillow, as if in her terror it was her only solace. Police theorized the killer had roughly woken her from sleep and dragged her to the bathroom. Each child suffered at least 20 fatal wounds. Yet even after killing them, the murderer's rage didn't stop. He kept stabbing as if unleashing a torrent of fury. At the scene, police found traces of blood in the kitchen sink, suggesting the killer washed their hands and body there. A thorough inventory revealed no theft. Nothing was disturbed, ruling out robbery as a motive. But one detail stood out: a kitchen knife was missing. Comparing the wounds, police concluded the killer brought a sharp blade, clearly prepared for the act. Then, passing through the kitchen, they grabbed another knife from the Tan's home. The killer likely dragged one child to the bathroom first, locking the others in the bedroom. After killing the first with the kitchen knife, they repeated the process, bringing each remaining child to the bathroom to meet the same fate. Based on rigor mortis, the forensic team estimated the murders occurred between 6:30 and 7:00 a.m., mere minutes after the Tans left for work. The killer likely lurked nearby waiting. This led police to suspect the perpetrator knew the family. The children opening the door didn't hesitate. They may even have welcomed the killer with smiles. But the chilling question remains among the Tan's acquaintances who harbored such venomous hatred to slaughter 4 innocent children. Under pressure from a swelling crowd of residents and media at the housing estate, the police held a press conference at the scene to calm the public. To protect the investigation, they released only bare details: 4 children from the Tan family had been brutally murdered. Specifics were kept under wraps, with additional fragments later revealed by reporters or the victims' relatives. A critical clue emerged: a tuft of hair. This detail came from Tran Khan Thai's brother, Tran Thai Thuan, on January 8th, 2 days after the killings. He recounted that after receiving the devastating news, he and the family went to identify the bodies at the police's arrangement. Examining Tan Kok Ping, the 10-year-old eldest son, he noticed the boy's left hand tightly clutching a 10-12 cm strand of hair. Tran Thai Thuan was certain it didn't belong to the boy, suggesting it could belong to the killer. In his final desperate struggle for life, Kok Ping had fought back, yanking hair from the murderer. Rumors swirled that a neighbor on the 6th floor of the opposite building saw the youngest Tan Tran Ni fleeing the bathroom, only to be grabbed and dragged back inside. The neighbor dismissed it as parental discipline, unaware it was the girl's final moment. Yet despite police appeals through media and the press conference, this witness never surfaced. No one confirmed the sighting, leaving the story of Tran Ni's desperate escape unverified truth or mere gossip. More chilling still, the savagery of the crime was unmatched. The killer struck all 4 children, each enduring over 20 stab wounds, yet no one in the building heard a sound. A relative of the Tans later shared that several police officers lived on the 5th floor where the tragedy unfolded. They often greeted or played with the kids in passing. None could fathom the horror that struck that day. Some officers, shaken to their core, wept silently. To crack the case swiftly, the Criminal Investigation Department, CID, mobilized its top investigators, forming a special task force led by Deputy Director Yim Wen Liang. The team split into groups working in parallel, and they sent evidence, hair, fingerprints, blood clothing to the lab for analysis while questioning Tan Khan, Tai Li Mei Ying, and hundreds of residents. Waves of neighbors were brought to CID headquarters for interrogation. The most critical step was grilling Tan Khan Tai and Li Mei Ying. Investigators demanded a detailed account of their day financial records and social connections, especially anyone they'd clashed with. Had their school bus business sparked envy? Had they made enemies? The CID was certain this wasn't a random crime. The killer took nothing, ruling out robbery. This was vengeance. A veteran investigator not directly involved told the press he shared the CID's view: this was a hate-driven murder. The killer likely knew the family, perhaps visited their home, and was familiar to the children who opened the door without hesitation. They also knew the parents' schedule, executing the massacre in a tight window. During questioning, Tan Kan Tai and Li Mei Ying insisted they were on good terms with relatives, friends, and neighbors. They couldn't imagine who could harbor such cruelty. Tan Kan Tai revealed they left home early that morning to pick up passengers rushing out and forgetting to lock the outer gate. He also mentioned a lost key they'd never replaced, suspecting the killer might have had access to it. This matched another lead. A neighbor, Ms. Ngo, told police that a month before the murders, Li Mei Ying mentioned losing a key. Too busy or unwilling to spend on a new lock, they hadn't replaced it. If the killer had found that key, it would explain the lack of forced entry. Li Mei Ying told investigators that when she left that morning, the children were fast asleep on the bedroom floor. Seeing her youngest Tran Ni cramped among her brothers, she felt a pang of guilt and moved her to the bed for comfort. On the second day after the murders, police swept the area, summoning several women from the neighborhood to CID headquarters. 2 in their 30s and 40s were suspected of financial disputes with the Tans. Li Mei Ying had run a tontine, a common trust-based savings pool popular in Fuji and Hong Kong and Southeast Asia in the last century. Such schemes reliant on mutual trust were risky and are now illegal in many countries as unauthorized fundraising. Li Mei Ying was the head of the tontine with participants called feet. Rumors pointed to 2 women, both feet, who owed significant sums. One SGD 1,000, approximately USD 750 in June 2025, the other over SGD 3,000, approximately USD 250. Li Mei Ying had repeatedly pressed them for repayment. Despite promises, they stalled, still owing when the murders occurred. A source told police that one woman surnamed Pu had a heated argument with Li Mei Ying days before the tragedy, though the reason was unclear. Could this debt-fueled conflict have driven her to hire someone to slaughter the children in revenge? The Singapore police kept details of the case tightly guarded, especially witness statements. But that didn't stop the press. Reporters camped out at CID headquarters and the crime scene, pouncing on anyone leaving an interrogation, Tan Kan Tai, Li Mei Ying, or neighbors for interviews. Their detailed reports gripped the public. Were these accounts identical to police statements? Did they embellish the truth? Hard to say. According to January 1979, news reports one summoned neighbor, Mrs. Shu, lived opposite the Tan's apartment. When investigators asked if she heard strange noises or saw anyone suspicious entering or leaving that morning, she said no. But when reporters probed about the tontine savings pool, Mrs. Shu clammed up, refusing to comment. The second neighbor, Mrs. Pu, spoke to the press on January 11th, 5 days after the murders. She and her husband, parents of 3, had lived on the 7th floor for 3 years. She often ran into Li Mei Ying in the stairwell, striking up a friendship. After a few chats, Li invited her to join the tontine. Initially, contributions were SGD 20 per round, rising to SGD 30 in the year before the murders, USD 15 to USD 22.50, based on June 2025 rates. Mrs. Pu said the families were close. Their kids played together. On January 6th, around 6:30 a.m., she took one of her children to the ground floor for the school bus. After the bus arrived, she returned to her 7th floor apartment. It wasn't until 10:30 a.m., hearing commotion in the hallway, that she learned the Tan children had been slaughtered. Strangely, she heard no screams or cries for help that morning. The next day, January 7th, CID brought Mrs. Puo and her husband in for questioning at 8 a.m. They waited until 6 p.m. to be interviewed, joining dozens of others at headquarters. Mrs. Pu told reporters the questions focused on the Tan's social connections and tontine disputes. She admitted to a gambling habit and owing the tontine SGD 100 USD 75, not SGD 1000 USD 750, as rumored. Li Mei Ying had covered the debt herself. When asked about their reported argument, Mrs. Pu confirmed a heated clash with Li Mei Ying over her late payments sparked by financial struggles. Lee's persistent demands frustrated her, but she insisted they reconciled with no lingering bad blood. A peculiar detail emerged. CID asked Mrs. Pooh if she saw a charcoal cellar used for cooking fuel at the estate that day. She hadn't. The question left her wondering if police suspected a charcoal vendor's involvement. In the days that followed, police questioned over 100 residents, nearly every tenant in the building. Another neighbor, surnamed Tran, recalled a strange man knocking on her door 5 days before the murders. When she answered, he claimed he'd knocked by mistake and left quickly. She wasn't sure if he was connected to the case. A 60-year-old woman who often sat in the corridor chatting with neighbors said she always noticed strangers. But on the morning of the murders around 8 a.m., she was indoors washing her hair, missing anything unusual. Another fifth-floor resident, Tran Ho Tu, told reporters that on January 15th, 5 days before the killings, a stranger knocked on her door around 5 p.m. Her youngest son nearly opened it, but she stopped him. Through the iron gate, she saw a young man lurking suspiciously. When she asked what he wanted, he held 2 bottles, mumbling incoherently. When she pressed, "Who are you looking for downstairs?" he bolted. Tran Ho Tu shared this with police, unsure if it was relevant. Another neighbor, Mrs. Ngo, close to the Tans, spoke to the press. She said the family lived in Balestier before moving to Geylang Bahru 4 or 5 years ago. Tan Kan Tai once drove deliveries for a steel shop on Virasamy Road, while Lee Mei Ying worked in a leather garment factory. They married for love, not through arrangement. Mrs. Ngo noted occasional spats, not over money or infidelity, but about their kids. With 4 children, often mischievous trouble was common. Mrs. Ngo explained that Lee Mei Ying disciplined the kids with scolding or light smacks, while Tan Kan Tai was softer, defending them. This sparked minor arguments, but their love and devotion to their children shone through. Mrs. Ngo described Lee as blunt but warm. 2 weeks before the murders, a neighbor gave Lee SGD $100 75 to pay their utility bill. Lee misplaced the money on a cluttered table and ended up covering it herself. To Mrs. Ngo, Lee was generous, not the type to make enemies. She couldn't fathom who could hate the family enough to commit such a heinous act. A neighbor choosing anonymity revealed a chilling detail. Months before the murders, the Tan family faced a failed break-in. A man posing as a utility worker claimed he was checking the plumbing and wiring. Tan Kan Tai and Lee Mei Ying were out leaving their 4 children and a neighbor's kid at home. When the children opened the door, the man demanded, "Where's the wallet?" When they said they didn't know, he rummaged through drawers and tried the cabinet. The neighbor's child, quick thinking, ran for help, scaring the intruder off. The most promising lead came on January 14th, 8 days after the massacre. A taxi driver contacted police, claiming he may have driven the killer. Around 8 a.m. that fateful morning, while passing Block 96, Geylang Bahru, he picked up a man in his 20s acting suspiciously. Blood stained the left side of his body. He looked panicked, exhausted, pressing himself against the car door, panting heavily. The driver asked, "What happened to you? Why the blood?" The man muttered he'd been attacked. At Lavender Road, he demanded to get out. As he exited, a metallic clank echoed. A knife handle protruded from his waistband, its blade hitting the car door. Based on his accent and appearance, the driver suspected the man was Malaysian. Police asked him to identify the suspect among local residents. Shockingly, he pointed to a young man living on the same floor as the Tans, just a few apartments away. Tan Kan Tai recognized him instantly, a Malaysian who lived with his sister, often borrowing the Tan's phone. He was close with the kids, who called him uncle. The Tans had no disputes or debts with him. Police investigated the Malaysian for 2 weeks but lacking solid evidence, released him. Soon after, he and his sister left the estate, returning to Malaysia, vanishing without a trace. Was he the killer? Many believed so, for compelling reasons. First, the driver picked him up at Block 96, Geylang Bahru, just 350 meters from the crime scene at Block 58, a 5-minute walk. The 8 a.m. pickup matched the killer's likely escape window. Second, the eldest victim, Tan Kok Ping, had his right arm nearly severed. This suggested a direct attack with blood likely splattering the killer's left side, matching the driver's description. Third, the driver had no reason to lie. He gained nothing from his tip and confidently identified the man among numerous suspects. Did the police let the killer slip away? Yet doubts lingered. Tontine Thai insisted he had no feud with the Malaysian. Taxi drivers, often glued to radio news, would have heard about the murders. Why did it take 8 days for this driver to report? If he feared retaliation, a few days' delay wouldn't help. Another puzzle: if the Malaysian was the killer, why risk strolling through the estate bloodied and armed to catch a taxi at Block 96? He could have returned to his apartment, changed clothes, and hidden the weapon unnoticed. Why parade his guilt in broad daylight? Singapore's Shin Min Daily News ran a bold front-page claim police knew the killer's identity. They alleged a young man was the culprit, a lead supposedly uncovered by Lee Mei Ying herself. The paper tied the murders to 4D lottery disputes and money conflicts. The 4D lottery, hugely popular in Singapore, involves picking a 4-digit number from 00 to 9999, 10,000 possibilities. Reports spun a dramatic tale. The suspect won SGD $50,000 to USD 37,500 in June 2025. In 1979, with an average annual salary of SGD 3,990, USD 2,990.50, or SGD 330, monthly USD 247.50, this was a fortune. The story went that the suspect had a woman buy his 4D ticket. When he demanded it, she claimed it was lost, saying an underground bookie took the winnings. Later, when she bought a school bus matching the Tan's business, his suspicions grew. He believed she cashed his prize, fueling a vengeful rampage against her children. Despite the paper's confident tone, no arrest was made by January 18th. Rumors escalated. Reports claimed the killer was about to be caught, hinting at an injured suspect under treatment. As misinformation spread, police intervened, denying they'd identified the killer and confirming the case remained open. 2 weeks after the murders, Tontine Thai received a chilling Lunar New Year card. Its cover showed children playing joyfully. Inside, the message was sinister. "Now you're childless, hahaha," signed the killer. It addressed the couple as a Thai and a Ying, intimate nicknames. The Tans were terrified. The phrase childless carried weight. After their youngest Tantran Ni was born, Lee Mei Ying, feeling 4 children were enough, underwent sterilization. How did the killer know this? The use of nicknames, a Thai and a Ying, convinced police the murderer was someone close, deeply familiar with the family. Who could harbor such venom? One detail casts doubt on the Malaysian suspect. If the timing of the Lunar New Year card is accurate, he couldn't be the killer. The taxi driver reported him 8 days after the murders, and police detained him for 2 weeks until the 3rd week post-crime. Yet the card was sent in the 2nd week while he was in custody. Unless he had an accomplice or supernatural powers, the timeline doesn't add up. Police likely compared the card's handwriting to suspect scripts, finding no match. Shin Min Daily News reporters pressed the Tans. Had they made enemies, offended anyone? The couple sighed, shaking their heads. Exhausted from relentless CID interrogations, they'd snapped under pressure. They swore they hid nothing, having spilled everything they knew. Yet some overheard family members grilling Tontine Thai. "Why didn't you report to the police sooner? Or, if you had, things might have been different." This report clearly wasn't about the massacre. but something earlier. What stopped Tontine Tai from alerting police? When reporters probed relatives, they clammed up claiming ignorance. After the tragedy, the Tans didn't flee their haunted apartment. They stayed driving the same school bus. Neighbors glimpsed them through the window eating silently with 4 extra plates and chopsticks set for their lost children. The sight broke hearts. Soon the couple couldn't bear driving, seeing other kids, and remembering their own. They sold the business. Nights were spent clinging to each other, weeping. They later took factory jobs and tried their hand at a plastics business. Rumors swirled that they sought to adopt a boy and girl, but found no suitable children. 4 years later, in a twist of fate, Lee Mei Ying underwent surgery to reverse her sterilization. Miraculously, after years of being unable to conceive, she became pregnant. On December 30th, 1983, she gave birth to a healthy boy. The family of 3 quietly faded from public view. 46 years later, the Tan Children's Massacre remains unsolved, one of Singapore's most infamous cold cases. Speculation and theories have never ceased. Some whisper of an extramarital affair. Could Lee Mei Ying's lover, wanting her to leave her family, have learned of her sterilization and felt betrayed? Enraged, did he slaughter her children in revenge? The most persistent rumor, though, is darker. The Tans knew the killer's identity. How else could the murderer know about Lee's sterilization? Such deep-seated hatred suggests a close connection. Why their silence? What held them back? The most plausible theory points to a grave crime. Singapore's laws are merciless, especially for capital offenses. The Tans might have been entangled in illegal activities like drug trafficking. If the killer knew this, it would explain their silence. Exposing the murderer could unravel their own crimes, risking execution. Singapore's strict drug laws make this chillingly plausible. Police found no fingerprints or clear traces of the killer, only blood, clothing, and other evidence. DNA analysis, introduced in Singapore in 1990, 11 years after the murders, wasn't advanced enough then, and evidence degrades over time. Whether future forensic breakthroughs could crack the case remains uncertain. Shockingly, forensic expert Dr. Chow Tse Chung revealed the hair clutched by victim Tan Kok Ping was his own, not the killer's. But why did the boy grab his own hair in agony, or did the killer plant it to mislead investigators? After the tragedy, mourners visited the children's graves, leaving flowers and toys, a touching tribute. Yet some came with darker motives. Fueled by reports linking the murders to 4D lottery winnings, gamblers paid respects, believing the Tans' supposed jackpot led to their deaths. They hoped offerings would bring luck and a winning ticket. In 2021, 42 years later, Singapore's nonprofit crime library revived the case to spark public interest, urging those with secrets to come forward. It drew attention. A former neighbor shared 3 details: the murders happened on the 5th floor, not the 4th, as some reports claimed. Lee Mei Ying wasn't a native Singaporean, and her real name was Lee Mok, not Lee Mei Ying. Though minor, these corrections were valuable, a rare voice breaking decades of silence. More such voices could unlock the case. That same year, Shinmin Daily News tracked down Lee Mei Ying, now over 70, living with her grandson. Her husband, Tontine Tai, had passed away, never seeing justice. When asked if she hoped for a breakthrough, she paused, eyes welling with tears, and said cryptically, "Some things once known change nothing." Some saw this as letting go. Others sensed she knew the killer's identity. Most in her shoes would vow to never give up. Why didn't she? Her words hinted at a deeper truth. The case leaves countless questions unanswered. For those involved, the wounds may have closed, buried in the past. What about you? Who do you think is the real killer behind this horrific tragedy? Why target 4 innocent children? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Before you go, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell to catch more gripping cases on true crime in the world.